All right, here we are with the Lake Fork recap from down there in that slugfest that I participated in the first day, and then the second day I just really hit the suck bus and really bombed on the second day. But first day had a pretty respectable day. Shout out to Trey McKinney for dropping 30 plus pounds 4 days in a row. Very impressive. The kid's 19 years old. I've been following him since he was a young teenager. Now he's still 19, still technically a teenager, but that kid is something else. Pretty phenomenal. So tip of the cap to you, Trey. Like I said, I've known him for a number of years before he even fished the opens to try to come up here. And since he's probably like 12 or 13, I was aware of Trey. We have a mutual friend, and pretty cool. Pretty cool. Very humble, nice kid. He'll be here for a long time. But as far as my tips, tools, and tactics that I used for Lake Fork, number one day, for day one, was bed fishing day for me. I drew out with a respectable boat 28 out of the 103 boat field. So I said, all right, I'm going to go to one of the more densely populated bed fishing areas to start with. And the only boat that was in front of me going into the area was Corey Johnston. And Corey stopped on an obvious bigger fish. And when he pulled up, there was like a big cluster of fish in one area, and then cluster of fish behind that. And I said, man, you gonna go to that area, or do you want that area? And he's like, no, I'm gonna get this area. You take that area back there. I was like, all right, cool, man, that'll work. So I went back to this other area and started fishing. The first one I looked at, it was so dark I couldn't see too well. And then the second one that I pulled up to, I could see the bed and I thought I could see a fish in it. I said, all right, here we go. So I think it was either the first or the second flip in there was Game Time with a 5'6" buck bass, and it ate the Missile Baits Destroyer and Green Pumpkin Flash. That is like, number one as far as my bed fishing baits, probably. A half-ounce tungsten weight with a little rubber stopper on there, 5/0 Gamakatsu heavy cover worm hook, and then I had that on 25-pound Sunline shooter. That is like my money for that heavy flipping stuff. 7.6 Cashin Icon flipping stick, heavy action. That 7.6 heavy. Anything that's like half-ounce-ish or more, I'm gonna go with that heavy action. And then the reel was the Daiwa Tatula flipping and pitching with the high speed, the 8-to-1. Man, I love this reel for flipping and pitching. It's got these bigger handles on them, so like when you wreck into one, you can just kind of crank it in. You can get a lot of leverage with those longer handles, and then when you're going from pitch to pitch, you pitch it in there. You can just grab those big handles, reel it in real fast, get it back out there. So a big fan of that reel, especially on that rod. That's a mean combination. And it's, that Tatula pitching and flipping, it's not gonna break your bank. It's a very reasonable reel price-wise. So that was my number one setup. And I caught that fish. I went about 20 feet, literally 20 feet down the bank, and there was another one set up on a little sandy spot. I threw the big destroyer in there at first, and I did like 4 or 5 pitches in there, and I thought, man, this is another big buck. I thought this fish would be all over it, but first cast with the baby destroyer in the same color, that Green Pumpkin Flash. The very first cast with this 5/16 tungsten and 20-pound version of the shooter, 20-pound version of that. That's what I had on there with the 7.6 Cashin. It's the same rod, but the medium heavy version. 7.6 flipping Icon with the medium heavy version. And then since it's a little lighter setup, I had the Daiwa. What the heck is this thing called? It's not the Tatula. It's the Zillion SVTW on there. That's the in the high speed as well. So I had that, pitched that bad boy in there, first pitch. Next thing I knew, doop, there goes my bait out to the middle. Set the hook, 4-pounder, 4.3, I believe it was. So that started my day pretty quick right there. And then the rest of the day was pretty much all bed fish. I think all of the rest of the fish that I weighed on day one, with the exception of one fish that I'll show you the next bait, was on this on the full-size destroyer. And my smallest fish of that day was a 3.9 that I caught on the missile baits, Magic Worm and Green Pumpkin Money. That is, if the water's relatively clear and you've got some sun, there is something about that color that I just absolutely love. I've caught a ton of fish on that. And I had the Gamakatsu #1 in that is the octopus inline. No, it's the regular octopus hook right there. And that's what I was using there. I had that on straight braid. I had that on the new Sunline Overwatch. I love this line. That was the 16. It's Lake Fork. Gotta go with the 16. So any, Lake Fork, Santee, any kind of place like that, you want to probably bump up to the 16. But that line will cast that light lure extremely well. I was making very long casts. Had that on the Daiwa Ballistic 3000 series spinning reel and the Cashin Icon 7.3 medium fast. That is the one I like for that. You can really get a lot of distance with that setup right there and make long casts. And that bait just kind of hovers in the water. It sinks really, really slow. So I'll throw that bait out there. I'll let it sink for 2 or 3 seconds. And then I just start shaking it on slack line and then let it go. And so what that does is, I think when that bait hits the surface, bloop, it gets their attention. And so if you can catch their attention with that bait hitting the water, whether you skip it in there or you cast it and bomb it in there and it lands, that if you catch their attention and that thing just starts to sink, and then you just make a dozen or so shakes with it and then let it sink. So what that worm is going to do is it's just going to undulate and pulse, and then it drives them crazy. And then that bait, that bait is horizontal. Once you put a teeny bit of pressure on it with those tugs, that bait is horizontal, and when it falls, it's going to start to shimmy a little bit as it slowly falls. If there's one looking at it or anywhere near it, I mean, it's a done deal. I mean, you're going to have a real good chance at catching them. So then on day 2, I had 22.9 on day 1. I was in the 40s because it's Lake Fork and we smashed them. Day 2, I went out and I thought that I was going to be able to, I caught a whole nother limit on a ChatterBait on the first day, about a 13-pound limit. None of those fish were counted, didn't even weigh them. But the one I was throwing was a 3/8 jackhammer in that green pumpkin and red color. I technically don't know the name of it. And I had a Missile Baits Chunky D trailer on there. I had that on 18-pound shooter, like this shooter, but 18-pound. That's what I had on that. And on this one, I've got the Cashin CK, which is the kayak series. It's called the Chattergrass rod. It's 7-foot 4-inch, made exactly for chatterbaits and grass. Really like the rod. Very good. And then the Zillion SVTW again, and the 7-to-1. So I caught a limit on that. So I thought going out in day 2, I thought I could easily run around and catch a limit of 13+ pounds with this, and then maybe run into some more bedfish and catch a decent limit. That didn't happen. What did happen is that the first place I went to, I tried to go to where I knew one was on a bed. I started just pitching the old Chunky D 3/0 Gamakatsu heavy cover worm hook, 3/8 ounce tungsten weight. Just started flipping that around, and I mean, like right off the bat, 2-pounder. But 5 minutes later, another small keeper. Work up to where that bedfish was. I couldn't see it. It was gone. So I just started fishing. And I would throw the ChatterBait and the Chunky D around, and man, I could not catch a keeper. I catch short fish here and there, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. The water temperature really didn't drop any, and it took me, honestly, I bounced around to a couple different areas, and I would catch shorts and everywhere I would go, and I thought, you know, how come I can't even catch a decent fish here? You know, so I started backing out a little bit deeper and pitching stuff that was a little bit deeper, thinking it may have pulled. That didn't work. You know, I was seeing some bedfish. The sun started to pop out, seeing some bedfish. Couldn't get them to commit. I worked on one for about 40 minutes, and then I hooked and lost a 4-pounder, and then it wouldn't act right. So I left it and came back, and it was gone. And so that was pretty frustrating. Yeah, outside of that one fish that I hooked and lost, I didn't have any issues with landing percentages or anything like that. Fished clean, I feel like. And the one that I lost was my fault. I'd worked this fish for a while. The fish grabbed the bait without me knowing it, and it swam out of the bed, swam around some gator grass, and then by the time I realized he had it, I set the hook, and then I see the gator grass start folding over, and then I see the fish boil up, and then I started, you know, like I couldn't get any good pressure on it because it had all that slack in it, and that fish came up and boiled and came off. So just kind of bad luck in that situation. Should have been paying closer attention. I don't know. Maybe I should have just kept reeling until all the slack was gone. I don't know. Anyway, I've replayed it 100 times. I don't know the right scenario in my mind of what I did wrong there. But I mean, that fish wouldn't have done really anything for me other than giving me an extra fish. But I wouldn't have. I'd have gone up another 5 places or something. So really, I just didn't adjust, because about noon or so, I noticed that it looked like the water had dropped a little bit. So I said, okay, I'm gonna move out to that first layer, you know, that next layer of grass, whatever. I should be able to catch them on the ChatterBait. So every time I would move areas, I'd get a bite, be short. And so I just kept bouncing around, and I kept running into bedfish that I couldn't catch because they just moved up and they were real spooky. They weren't really territorial yet. And so it really kind of like extended my vision of what was really going on. And I ended up having a finish in the 80s, terrible finish, but I learned a lot, and I'm glad that those first 2 tournaments are behind me. I had a lot of people with encouraging messages after I put out a video. The last video I put out was basically talking about, you know, how it's on me. You know, everything was on me. It was my fault that I didn't figure them out in practice in both tournaments better, and it was my fault that I didn't execute better and adapt better during the tournaments as well. So I'm ready for a little bit of a breather, and I'm gonna get out there on the water and do some more fishing, and we're going to stretch some more sunline and bend some more casting rods between now and the next couple of elite events, and I'll be ready for that Florida swing, I can tell you that much. But I appreciate everybody watching. If you want to find some more baits, that thing right there is beautiful. If you're down in Texas, ooh boy,